Lifelong health and well-being of human beings is built on sort of three foundations. The first is an environment of relationships. A second is the need for protective and safe physical environment. And then the third foundation is nutrition, that children also need to be fed and eat well, to be given the protein and all of the different food groups that are a part of a healthy human diet. And children need all forms of food, of protein, of fats that come in milk and other foods, vegetables and fruits. They need a balanced diet. And they need minimal exposure to the kind of fast food offerings that are so prevalent and so abundant out there within contemporary society.
Welcome to Conversations with KidCare Canada. Do you feel confident that your little ones are having their nutritional needs met? With us in the studio today is well-loved dietitian Kristen Yarker. Welcome, Kristen.
Thank you so much for the invitation to be here with you today.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to have you. So I've heard so much about you, and I think I'm going to be calling you the Mary Poppins of dietetics. So before we get going, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I've been a dietitian for many years. When you combine my years of training and practicing as a dietitian, I've been doing nutrition for, can't believe it, 24 years now. And I was really quite lucky that I knew what I wanted to do from a young age. As a teenager, I loved food and found out that there was something called a dietitian. And then when I got to university, I realized that there was something called child development, because I was also always that kid in the neighborhood who was babysitting the other kids and looking after the little ones. And so when I got to university and I found out that I could combine my love of food with child development, I knew I'd found my passion, my calling.
So before we get going, you have a philosophy about an approach to introducing foods to little ones. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, it's something that I really hold close to my heart. And when I'm doing my work with individual families, when I'm doing workshops or training other childcare providers, or I'm working behind the scenes for government, health authorities, or health nonprofits to develop resources like the Pediatric Nutrition Guidelines for health professionals in BC, I really want to infuse a couple different philosophies or bring things to light. So the first one is that there's a really important shift in thinking that parents need to make when introducing solid foods. Up until then, it's all been about feeding your baby. But now it's no longer about feeding your baby. Now it's about bringing your baby to the family table. Also, up until now, it's been about meeting your child's nutrition needs. When we start introducing solid foods, there's now two goals. The first is absolutely continuing to meet their now changing nutrition needs. But the second is that we need to give kids the opportunity to learn and to practice this new skill of eating. It's one of the most complicated things we ever learn how to do. And so we need to give kids the opportunity to learn how to handle different textures in their mouth, how to use utensils, and even how to sit at a table and eat a meal.
So many parents are a little nervous at this time of life, and they find this very emotional. Can you tell us a bit about why? What's going on?
Oh, there's so many layers of what's going on, and so being emotional as a parent at this stage is very appropriate. Food is emotional. It really touches on who we are as people. It's often an expression of love, and so if a child rejects the food, it can feel like you're personally being rejected. There's a lot of trust that goes involved, and it feels complicated to trust that your child's eating enough and meeting their nutrition needs, of course. But then it's also the very first time where your child is starting to grow up, to move away from you, which is the natural process, right? In parenting, you provide them the skills and the values and what they need to move ahead in life. And this is the very first time that your baby starts moving away from you. And so that can bring up a lot of emotions for parents.
Oh, Thank you. So you do lots of workshops, and what we decided to do, because you know so much, is to organize today around the two big questions that you often get. And what are they?
Introducing solid foods for babies and the so-called picky eating years.
Let's get going. Okay. Some of the foods that you mentioned are considered potential allergens. Has anything changed in the way these foods are introduced?
Absolutely. Our understanding of food allergies has changed significantly in the last number of years. And so as follows, our recommendations for how to introduce solid foods has changed. A lot of this change has created a lot of confusion for people, because if they're Google searching or asking people, the recommendations have changed a lot, so they'll hear a lot of conflicting information. It's an area of very active research, and so I'm sure our recommendations will change as we learn more, but I'll share with you what we know as of currently today. For most foods, we recommend going ahead and introducing them. You don't need to introduce most foods one at a time anymore. It really didn't seem to be protective, and so we really want to introduce a wide variety of tastes and textures at this age, because that's how kids start to learn to like a variety of foods. So introduce lots of foods quickly. For the common food allergens, and I'll list them in a moment, if kids are not at increased risk of having a food allergy, there's no need to introduce those one at a time either. But if children are at increased risk of having a food allergy, we do recommend introducing the common allergens one at a time. So a child is at increased risk for allergy if they have severe eczema before trying the solid foods, or if we call it first degree relatives, so whether a biological mom, biological dad, or a biological brother or sister has a food allergy or asthma or even like a pet allergy, those types of things, that does mean that a child's at increased risk of having an allergic reaction to a food. And so if that's your child, what we do recommend is to introduce the food allergens early on, as introducing them at about 6 months of age, and one at a time, and ideally keeping them in the rotation several times a week to help build that tolerance. So that recommendation has changed a lot. We used to recommend waiting to introduce those foods. Now we recommend pretty much the opposite, introduce them right away and keep them in the rotation. So those common food allergens, I know you've been waiting to hear what are those foods. They are dairy, soy, wheat, eggs, seafood, sesame, which is interesting, peanuts, and then what we call tree nuts, so all the other nuts. Those are the common food allergens in Canada.
Thank you. In about a minute, we're going to go to a break. But before we do that, maybe you could speak a little bit about the texture of the foods that we want to give when introducing solids.
Absolutely. That's another thing that I see a lot of parents get confused about or worried about. And so what we want to do is introduce foods that minimize risk for choking. And so we want to prepare the foods in ways that would minimize that risk, either by making them soft, which is often called the puree method, or introducing them as finger foods, but in small enough form so that even if they do go down the wrong way, they're not going to block their airway. I like to take a moment to differentiate gagging versus choking, because this is something for parents that I find is quite confusing. Choking, of course, is the thing that we're concerned about, is the dangerous thing. And that's where food goes down partway, blocks their airway, and they can't breathe. Gagging is something that's quite different, though. Gagging is actually a protective mechanism. It's a good thing, because when somebody gags, it means something's gone to the back of the mouth a little quickly, and so it brings it forward to keep that airway clear. And babies really have no negative association with gagging. They have all sorts of bodily functions. They have no idea what's going on. And some parents even tell me, oh yeah, my little one has figured out how to put their fingers down the back of their mouth, and they cause themselves to gag, and they do it over and over again. And they're like, wow, look what I can do. and us as adults are cringing, and we're like, oh, each time they're doing it. Because of course to us, gagging makes us cringe because we associate it with either choking or throwing up, neither of which are pleasant. But for babies, they have no negative association. And so I like to say that expect some gagging, because babies are learning this new skill. So it's kind of like stumbling as they're learning to walk. It's normal for gagging to happen. Some kids do it more than others, just like some of us are more coordinated than others. And but what you don't want to do is to have a huge scared reaction when baby gags, because as you know,
so the parent's facial expression is important.
Babies are so in tune with our emotions, right? And so we don't want kids to pick up, oh, there's something scary about eating. So you can have a little concern, maybe, oh, some smaller bites or, calming words, but really try to not have that strong, scared reaction to gagging.
This seems like a perfect time to take a little break. We'll see you in a few minutes after you've learned a little bit more about KidCare Canada.
A child's early years are foundational for lifelong mental and physical health. KidCare Canada Society is a charitable organization incorporated in the province of British Columbia. We seek to empower families to raise their children to be socially and emotionally healthy, and ensure families and those who support them have easy access to relevant, current research at no cost to the end user. Our appealing videos, now being captioned in various languages, feature world-renowned experts and real families. To access these videos and other free resources, log on to KidCareCanada.org.
Welcome back to Conversations with KidCare Canada. If you're just joining us, I'm your host, Estelle Paget, and with us in the studio today is Kristen Yarker, a very well-loved dietitian. And if you take a look at this table, you're going to see she's brought goodies. Thank you, Kristen.
I'm so pleased to be here today. I love talking about introducing solid foods for babies. And so yes, brought lots of examples of things to introduce here. We talk about introducing iron-rich foods as first food. So I wanted to show a few different examples of how to prepare iron-rich foods in a way that is safe from preventing any choking hazard. So something, as we mentioned before, you can prepare them either by making them soft, the puree method, or doing the finger food method, which we do recommend introducing finger foods at least about 6 months or so. And prepare the iron-rich foods and other delicious foods that I've shared today in the finger food method as well. So what I'm sharing today, for example, we talk about introducing iron-rich foods such as seafood. We have amazing salmon here on the coast, so I'm bringing some salmon as an example. Salmon, you do want to cook until it flakes so that it is safe from a preventing food-borne illness point of view. And then go through it with your fingers to make sure that there aren't any little bones in there. You also want to remove the skin as well, because the skin can be a choking hazard. I also have brought some lentils. They're a great iron-rich food, and you don't need to do anything to them. A red lentil will cook and become a puree on its own, and the green lentils are so small that they don't present a choking hazard. Nuts and seeds are a decent source of iron, and so I brought hemp hearts today. They're so tiny, they're not going to cause any choking hazard. And tofu. You can use a soft tofu, which is a puree as well. Or here I've got an extra firm tofu that I've cut into little fingers. And I love little fingers because if the little ones take bites off of them, they're not going to block an airway. And also when they're particularly little, they will scoop up the food from their tray or their high chair and have it in their fist. And when they're really little, they don't know how to open their fist to get the food back out. Yeah. So I love a skinny finger because good chance there's going to be some sticking out that they can that they can eat. I also brought an example of chickpeas here. Chickpeas, I always like to say, are unfortunately a fantastic example of a choking hazard. So you do not want to give baby whole chickpeas. Either use a fork to mash them, or we often eat chickpeas as a puree. also known as hummus. So that's a fantastic way. One of the potential common food allergens that we mentioned is peanuts. And parents often want to know how to serve their baby peanuts. Of course, a whole peanut is a choking hazard. Right. But something that also is often not thought of is that having a big glob, a sticky glob of peanut butter can also block an airway. So to prepare it for baby, you can either spread it smoothly on some toast or a tortilla, something like that, which I've done here. Or you can thin it out with some water and then mix it into an infant cereal. Infant cereal is also iron fortified, so you've got iron fortified infant cereal, and then you're also introducing the peanuts to help promote tolerance to peanuts. So I've just got a tablespoon of water. You mix the tablespoon of water with your peanut butter there, and then mix it all together into the cereal. Add a little more water to moisten it, and you'll create a fantastic, oh, we're a little dry. You know what? I've got some water in my mug. We're going live. This is the reality. And something that you're looking for even that very first puree texture, often parents think you need to do a really, really smooth puree. You don't need to go that smooth. What we recommend is actually what we call fork mashed. So picture mashed potatoes. That's a fantastic texture right from the start.
We'll get you some more water to drink.
Oh yeah, that's okay. I don't mind sharing with our imaginary baby we're feeding today. Here we go. Maybe one more little dab. And this is the reality of how it goes. You don't have to have exacting recipes. You just kind of mix it until looks like
good.
There we go, voila, like a fork mashed potato texture. What else did I also bring today? Eggs, fantastic iron-rich food, and a few different ways you can prepare them for baby. You can hard boil, mix it with a little warm water to make a slurry, and that is a great puree way. A fantastic finger food way is you can cook them into a firm omelet, not the French style kind of runny omelet, but more I call it the American diner style omelet, the quite firm, and then cut it into skinny fingers. That's
Great
a
idea.
fantastic way. We have a few other foods here that are great. Avocado, of course, is soft. It's not an iron-rich food, but it's a food that's naturally soft, easy to prepare for babies. You can fork mash some strawberries. You can, for grapes, anything that's firm and round can be a choking hazard, like that chickpea I mentioned, like hot dogs or cherry tomatoes. You can continue thinking of examples of hard round things. And so you want to cut those into smaller pieces that won't block an airway. So here I've just cut up the grapes into some smaller pieces to showcase that. People often think you have to cook fruits or hard vegetables to offer them to baby. You can absolutely do that and cook them until they're nice and soft. Or, for example, I've grated this carrot, so you can still offer it raw, but you can grate it. I'm a big fan of preparing foods, family foods that you're feeding your baby, in simple ways to modify them so that they're safe from a choking hazard. This really helps so that there's less preparation time for you. It's just practical, but also if you've done a lot of work to make these fancy purees and do a lot of baby food, and then baby doesn't eat, it tends to get you more worked up because you've done all this effort and all this work and food waste, and you just don't, it can be very much easier to try to force baby to eat then.
And so your
go
philosophy
ahead.
is that really the family, that you should serve the same foods as you would serve to your family, have the baby at the table with the family, and then baby gets to enjoy the same meal. Everyone gets to enjoy the same meal, and nobody feels bad if the baby doesn't eat. Now,
Absolutely.
we are very close to time, and we wanted to talk about the picky eater. So if we do all this, does it mean you're not going to have a picky eater?
It's not a guarantee, but introducing little ones to a wide variety of tastes, a wide variety of textures, does help them learn to like new foods. We learn to like new foods through repeated exposure, and so exposing little ones to the biggest variety possible does help lower the chances of picky eating.
We've talked a little bit about the emotional impact of eating, or how it's associated with emotions. And we have a very short video that we're going to show with Dr. Carolyn Steinberg, a psychiatrist who helps to explain how emotions do creep in to feeding babies.
So for example, I'm thinking of a parent who was triggered every time her baby threw some food on the floor. This mom then was not able to stay in the moment with her baby to direct the child to think what the child might be communicating with throwing the banana on the floor. And of course, the more upset she was in those moments, the more the baby was at a loss as to know what to do in that moment as well. And so an interaction of repeated throwing things started to occur, which triggered the mother more and more than to be upset, rather than to manage what would be a very simple task for many of us. That mom could learn why she was being triggered, what meaning that event had, and that of course provides a little trail back into her past. And by learning what it actually meant and being able to compare why she was feeling this way with the reality of the circumstance of dropping a mashed banana on the floor, she's then able to put the past experiences into perspective and to deal with her child in a way that helps her and her infant get through these feeding experiences. One of the basic questions I would ask is, what is this triggering for you? What meaning does this have for you? We have on the one hand your baby who's dropped a banana on the floor, but we have on the other hand a reaction from you that seems to be quite a significant one for this. And in this particular circumstance, the woman had come from a family where there was an enormous shortage of food at one point. And she hadn't made the connection between her own sufferings with not having enough food and her baby's seeming disregard for respect for the food that was given to her.
There's a lot in that little video. What stood out for you?
What stood out for me was all the different layers of meaning behind something as simple as a little one throwing food. Almost every baby throws some food, and often parents ask me, how do I stop my baby from throwing food? And really it depends on what's causing them to throw the food. Figuring out the source of that behavior then determines how to intervene in that.
So what are some of the reasons that babies throw food?
Well, sometimes they're just exploring gravity, right? They're like, what happens when I do this? Oh, it falls. They do that with toys. Of course, they're going to do that with food as well. Another thing that is universally enjoyable is feeding the dog. If there's a family dog, they immediately make best friends with the little one who's being fed solid foods, and it is endlessly entertaining to feed their four-legged friend their food. Another thing that I see is that babies often are loving exploring cause and effect. And when they throw food, they get a big reaction from parent. Throw food, big reaction, so that can be fun. The last one that I see very common is often when there's the swipe. And that's really that the little one has been signaling in more subtle ways that they're full, but the parent has been overriding they're all full. They haven't been believing they're all full. So maybe baby gives a little side turn away. Parent still keeps trying, oh, come on, have another bite. Maybe the little one's starting to talk and can say all done, or you've taught your little one to sign and they've signed all done. And parents often, because they think, oh, they can't be done yet, or they don't want to waste food, they go, okay, no, one more bite, 2 more bites, how much more of this? And so babies learn they need to escalate it to swipe down on the floor. That's how parents then stop trying to feed them. So it's really about figuring out what's causing that and then addressing the root cause of the behavior.
And you just picked up on another thing that was in that video, and that is food waste, and that we really are informed by our own past. And so if there was a food shortage in our past, that can help us today or it can make us not want to waste food today. And also today there is a really great reality that there is a shortage of food for so many people. So many people are dealing with food insecurity, and so seeing a child waste food is really upsetting.
Absolutely, or feeding your little one something, especially if you've made a special meal or a special dish that maybe you're Googling and searching for hours online what my child would like. You make that for them and they don't eat it. Oh, that can be a huge problem for people. And so that's why I prefer the alternative method of making family foods and then modifying it for your child.
So to sum up, there are two things that you have said that have really stuck with me, and one is, as with all other aspects of parenting, we don't want to force our child to do anything. And the other one is that we need to be attentive to little ones and watch for their cues.
Absolutely. It really is a beautiful two-way interaction, feeding, and we're social creatures, and food is a part of our social nature. And so I love bringing baby into that, and it's such a great fit with the other things you teach here.
Thank you so much for coming with us today. It has been such a pleasure to have you.
Absolutely my pleasure.
And thank you for joining us with Conversations with KidCare Canada. Remember, you can visit our website, you can follow us on social media, and we're here to support you on your journey as a parent.
As we define nurture in our book, ABCs for New Parents, nurture is the care and encouragement we give our babies to grow and develop. The ABCs book is being distributed to all new parents in the province, and copies can also be purchased online at the Queen's Printer through Crown Publications.